So before we start with the XML, there's one thing that's going to prove very useful. Since we have this menu and it produces 4 integers, 1, 2, 3, and 4, but I'd like to save my scores using these names, fledgling score, instead of score 1, score 4, etc. It would be very convenient if I had something to correlate the numbers 1 through 4 with these 4 names. So for that, I'm going to create another flow graph module. So we go to our FG modules section here, and I'm going to just make this specific to this level. If you plan on expanding your game to multiple levels, then you're going to want to make it global. So I'm going to go to the flow graph menu under File, New FG Module, Level, and I'm going to call this Get Difficulty Name. I'm going to start by making plenty of space and getting rid of that mapping right there. And what I'm going to do is end up setting a string and sending it back. So I want to go ahead and edit my module ports. The input that I'm going to give it is going to be an integer. And the output that I'm going to return is going to be a string. So here's my new input port, and here's my new output port. So I know this is going to be 1 through 4, and from that I need to correlate those numbers to 4 different strings. So I know I'm going to need a set string. In fact, I'm going to need 4 of them. And whichever one of these is triggered, I'm going to feed it to here. So I know I'm going to need a logic any. I'm going to go ahead and feed one of these to this output port and then just insert the logic any here, since it sort of saves me a little bit of trouble. And then it doesn't matter which of these ports I use. Any signal is going to be sent to the output. And then of course I need a demultiplexer. So my integer is going to come to here. You may have noticed that these demultiplexers have 2 different inputs that you can use, index and input. I don't have any kind of explanation for why there's 2 of them or what the history of that node is. I haven't found that it makes a difference. However, if you want to be safe, instead of always, you can specifically name the input that you're listening to. So if I don't need to listen to input, I can say just listen to the index input. And of course, my 4 possible values are going to be 1 through 4, so it's going to trigger ports 1 through 4. And then I need to set the actual strings here, so this is going to be the same as my menu. So the idea is that we're going to display it and say, hey, the high cardinal score is 5. So there's one last very important thing I got to do. I have to trigger this success input for the flow graph module to return this value. And there's my finished flow graph module. Send it the integer of the current difficulty level and return the name of the current difficulty level just for the purpose of saving it in my XML file. Now don't forget that when you save your level, it doesn't save external flow graph modules. You got to do that here in the flow graph menu. File, Save All External Graphs, and then the little star disappears and I know I'm good to go. So I've created a comment box here just to remind you of what it is we're trying to do. When the player dies, we want to check if we have the high score for this specific difficulty level, 1 through 4. If we do, we want to overwrite the value that's already in the XML file. If we don't, then we do nothing. But we also have to address the very first time we try to read the XML file. So we have to check it if it exists, and we have to check if a high score for this particular level already exists. So first things first, let's begin by tracking whether the player is dead. Just to remind ourselves so this doesn't get too confusing, I'm only going to ask it to check this when the result changes. And the next thing is I need to know my current difficulty level. And now I need to use this number to find out the name of my current difficulty level so that I can both read and write a value like this, fledgling score, starling score. Again, this is optional. You could just call it score 1, score 2. We need to call this flow graph module that we created called get difficulty name, and that should appear right here. And if you remember, the reason that it doesn't appear yet is that these XML flow graph modules are independent and this tree doesn't get refreshed automatically. So we just have to close flow graph and reopen it again in order to refresh the tree. And now if we look under module, we should see a new 4th call, which is get difficulty name. So I'm going to drag that over here. There's no entity involved, so don't worry about the red in this case. I'm going to feed it the integer as my current difficulty level. And then what I want to do is add the word score to this name so that it looks like this, fledgling score, starling score. So for that, I need a concat. And now I'm ready to actually open my XML document. If we go to our XML nodes and open document and drag that on here, I'm going to go ahead and execute. I need to decide the file name. You can call this anything you like. I'm just going to call it flappydata.xml. Make sure you include the extension name. It's not going to do that by itself. There are 4 possible places where you can store XML files. Map means the same folder as the level. So I'm just going to leave it there. If you want to explore the other options, knock yourself out. So you notice we've got success and failure. And what I want to do right now is deal with failure, which means the file doesn't even exist, or this particular section of the file doesn't exist. And in that case, my logic is going to branch off down here, and the first thing I need to do is make a new document. Now that I've got my new document, then I need to make a new child, which is my particular section. I'm going to assume I'm successful here. And the name is going to be the same as I already have here. So I'm going to feed that across here, and here's where I have to start to get kind of fussy about making these things nice and neat, something like that. Then I need to know my current score. And I need to actually write it to this child that I've just created. So that's set value. And then last but not least, by any means, I need to save the document. And I want to be very careful not to mess up this file name, which is why I actually copied it to the clipboard. If you want to be really careful, I suppose you could save it to a game token. And again, I'm just going to leave it in the default location, which is the level folder. Okay, so that takes care of the branch of logic when it's the very first time I'm creating the entire XML file. Now let's go back here where we first tried to open the document, and if we succeeded, then the question is, does a high score exist for my current level? So what I want to do is try and get the child whose name I just created here. I hope you can read this. I know it starts to get a bit messy. Sometimes there's just no way to make this perfectly neat. So here's where we have this little trick. If we succeed, that means a high score already exists, and we're going to need to compare it to our current high score and see which one is higher. But if it fails, instead of making a new child here, all we have to do is say, oh, well, if it doesn't exist, go ahead and create it. So we can really combine 2 things into one node. So now we can assume that either we've opened that child or we've created it, we've got success, and now we need to actually try and retrieve the value. So that's get value. We already know it exists, so we know we're going to have success here. We need another one of these. I'm going to paste it without links. And then we need to compare the last saved high score for this level with my current score. So there's a number of ways to do this. I'm just going to use mathless. So just to remind myself, I'm going to spell it out. If my current score is less than the last saved high score, then I'm not going to write anything to the file. However, if that's false, I want to go ahead and set value. And I want to take my current score, set it as the value here. And then again, assuming this has succeeded, I want to go ahead and save that same document. So I'm going to insert a logic any here so I don't have to repeat the save document node. So looking at this carefully, I do see one mistake that I made right in the beginning that you might have noticed, which is if boo is dead equals true is true, then I need to trigger the game token get. I don't want to just send the output to it. Let's go ahead and test now. So I'm just going to play to one point on here and then deliberately die and see if it goes ahead and saves that score. In the upper right hand corner you see this message, flappydata.xml generating asset metadata. And now if we go and look in our level folder, we'll see this file, flappydata.xml, and there's our very first XML data. Fledgling score, 1, close the fledgling score child. Now one thing I forgot to do was to name this thing so it doesn't just say root. And that's right here. When I say new document, instead of calling the root, I'm going to call it high scores, like this. So what I'm going to do is go back and delete this XML file and test again. And again, I'll just play to 1 point because this is a very slow game at this speed. Die. Watch the upper right hand corner. There's my metadata, my XML being written. Stop the game and go back and open this file one more time. And there's my high scores and my one child. Let's test it on a different level. Keep in mind that the children are going to be written in the order they were written within your XML file. They're not going to be written in this order by any means. Not that it makes any difference. It's not that the user is ever going to see inside that file. So just to prove my point, I'll play at the ninja level here. And I'll play it to 4 points just to kind of make it very easy to understand what's going on here. 4 points and death. Again, writing XML data. Go back to this file, look at it again, and there's my hawk score to 4 points. All that's working perfectly. Okay, so we have one last thing that we want to do for our user interface, and that's to display a message, and I'm going to put it in the upper right-hand corner. And what I want to do is tell the player if a high score exists for the current difficulty level, what it is, and say, hey, the score to beat is 13 or 15 or whatever it happens to be. And then if and when they surpass that, flash a little sound and change the message and say, hey, congratulations, you have the new high score. So we're going to be using the same kind of tokens that we've been using. And what I've done is make a comment box already. I know it's going to be wide, so I've given myself a lot of space. And I'm going to start it next to this node that displays the start menu, because I'm going to need to start this whole process and get this message on screen as soon as the user chooses their difficulty level and this menu is hidden. So I know I'm going to need to open my XML document, Flappy Data. So I'm going to take this node and just copy it to start, just because I'm lazy. And I'm going to paste that in here. Of course, I could paste it without links. It doesn't really matter. So as soon as my menu is hidden, which means that the user's made a selection of difficulty level and the game is starting, I want to try and open my document. So flappydata.xml is my document name. And the next thing is I need to know which difficulty level has been selected. So I need a game token get. And of course my game token is going to be my difficulty level. And from that I need to use my flowgraph module to actually retrieve the name of this difficulty level, because I'm going to need it. And I want to do the same thing I did before, which is add the word score to the end of this. If I can find my string concat, here we go. I'm going to copy this thing, and it's going to be a little bit different than that, but pretty close. So when this is done, I want to add the word score. So this will be, for instance, hawk score, fledgling score. And that's going to be the name of the child that I want to try and open inside my XML file. So now I'm ready for my XML nodes. So now our logic is going to start to branch. So let me first deal with an existing score. So that would mean success. There is a high score saved for this particular difficulty level, and I need to know what it is and compare it to my score as I play. So what I want to do here is display a message that says the hawk high score to beat is blah blah blah, or the fledgling high score to beat is blah blah blah. So my name comes from back here from my string difficulty level. So I'm going to move these down and send this over. Try and make it as neat as I can, like this. And then I'm going to put a space and say high score to beat, colon, space, and then I need to actually retrieve that value of that child. So again, the message that I'm going to get here is the name of the difficulty level, and then high score to beat, and now I need the actual value of that score. So now I'm ready for my get value. Actually, I should have inserted that here. There we go. And then I need another string concat. So now, just to remind myself what I've got, I'm going to add a comment here. Remind myself what I'm building. MSG for message. And that's my entire message right there. That's what I'm building with these two concatenators. And now I can actually go ahead and display my message. And in the game that I finished and made the YouTube video of, I actually made a UI element for this. You can look back to the instructions on the chapter for making a flash or a scale form element. The way we did the score, it's exactly the same thing if you want to develop a UI element for this message. For now, I'm just going to use a debug display message. So let me put this a bit further over to the right so it doesn't overlap with my score. Make it a bit different than my score color. Okay, so that takes care of that part of it. Now we got to go back to where we started the branch here. And after we've retrieved this value, now what we want to do is monitor the score as the player plays. And when their score exceeds this retrieved last high score, we want to change this message. So I'm going to need to do a comparison here. So I'm going to use math less. And I need to monitor the current score, so that's my game token. Token is my current score. I can go ahead and do this. So what's my current score? And these things can be a little confusing which way the comparison goes, so I always encourage you to put a comment. That's the question I'm asking. And when that's true, then we have a new high score, and now we want to go ahead and display a new message. Now this is a little bit tricky. Don't forget to hide the old message. So once this becomes true, I'm going to go ahead and hide this so I don't overlap. I'm going to copy this and put it over here because I'm going to make a new message. Show this. And the message, I'm going to keep it simple and just say, you have the new high score. If I wanted to get tricky, I could put another concatenate here and say, you have the new high hawk score or the new fledgling score or whatever you want to do, if you want to be a little more fancy. There's one slightly wasteful aspect to this logic here. I don't know if you're seeing it. It's not a big deal in this game, but it is right here. So we're asking in every single frame of the game, what's my current score? And we're comparing it to the last saved score. And then we're triggering this message that says, you have the new high score. Well, that's literally going to keep triggering every single frame of the game, and we only need it to happen once. So what I did in the screen capture in the book and the flow graph of the finished level is just add a Boolean flag here to say, okay, I've already displayed this message once, I don't need to do it again. So I'm going to use a graph token instead of a game token. I don't remember if I've introduced this. It's just like a game token, except it just lives within this particular graph. So tools, edit graph tokens, new token. I'm just going to call this boo high score message displayed. And before I forget, on game start, let me go ahead and initiate that. And you'll notice here that the graph tokens appear in a different group than the game tokens. And I want to set this to false. I have not yet displayed the message, so that's initiated. I'm going to copy that game token set. And over here, the very first time, and over here, what I want to do is first check the value of this. So we've checked our flag here, and now we need to compare it to a value. So again, it's good to put the question that you're asking in plain English so you don't get confused. That's the question. And if it's true that we already have congratulated them, then we don't want to do anything. So we only want to make the congratulations sound and message if we haven't yet done so. So this is the output that we're interested in. I also want to play an audio trigger. So I've created one called Congratulations here, and this is the sound that I provided. It sounds like this. You notice there's no attenuation, no looping, very simple. So after the message has been shown, go ahead and play it. And the only thing is, this is going to trigger at the same moment that the particle effect sound goes off, which is kind of a loud explosion in many cases. So what I'm going to do is insert a delay to give time for the particle sound to play. Just, I don't know, 0.4 of a second, something like that. So this little alert won't come up exactly when they achieve the high score. It'll be a fraction of a second later, but the important thing is that they hear it. Oh, and I forgot the most important thing. We need to set the flag and say, okay, now we've done this. That needs to go in between here and here. Like that. And let's have a test. And there was my new high score message and the sound. And that's it for Chapter 12, User Interface.